When India gained independence in 1947, the world saw it as a political history. But beneath the surface, it was an economic liberation from 2 centuries of systematic plunder. For every rail track they built, for every school and office they left behind, the British looted wealth that India is still recovering from. Today, we're asking, what did British rule really cost India? In this Independence Day series by ForumIAS, we take a hard look at how the colonial machinery looted and ruined Indian economy. Number 1. Deindustrialization. At the dawn of 18th century, India was one of the largest textile producers in the world. Indian cottons, muslins, and silks were prized across Europe and Asia, as large as that it accounted for 24% of the global economy. But British colonial policies systematically deindustrialized India. Traditional industries were taxed heavily, while imports of British manufactured goods were made cheaper. Finished textiles from British factories flooded Indian markets, reducing skilled weavers to poverty. The famous Dhaka muslin industry, which was once a symbol of India's textile supremacy, vanished almost entirely by the mid-19th century. Overall, India's share in world manufacturing dropped from 27% to under 2%. Second, the exploitative land revenue systems. The permanent settlement of 1793 and subsequent revenue systems such as the Roytwari and Mahalwari were designed not for agricultural development but to maximize colonial revenue extraction. Peasants were burdened with exorbitant taxes, often set arbitrarily, irrespective of crop failures or market conditions. Land was no longer a means of sustenance but a revenue asset for the crown. And the result? A cycle of indebtedness, dispossession, and rural pauperization. In regions like Bengal, the British zamindari system created a new class of absentee landlords who extracted rents mercilessly with little regard for agrarian distress. Third, forced cultivation and the opium economy. British economic policies were not confined to just taxation. In many regions, peasants were forced to cultivate cash crops like indigo, opium, and cotton. The infamous Indigo Revolt of 1859-60 in Bengal and Bihar was a direct response to this. The Industrial Revolution had spurred the textile boom in Britain, and indigo was used for dyeing fabrics, particularly before synthetic dyes emerged. To meet the surging demand, British planters turned to Bengal and Bihar, forcing Indian farmers to grow indigo under exploitative conditions. The Teen Kathia system was emblematic of this coercion. Under this arrangement, peasants were forced to cultivate indigo on 3 out of every 20 parts of their land, regardless of the soil's suitability. And even worse, they were paid meager advances, often at interest rates that ensured a cycle of perpetual debt. Indigo cultivation was economically ruinous. The plant severely depleted soil fertility, rendered the land infertile for food crops. Farmers faced declining yields, rising debts, and the wrath of colonial planters who often used latials to enforce compliance. Fourth, famines. As a result, the region experienced a catastrophic famine which killed nearly 1/3 of its population, or an estimated 10 million people, and Britishers were so cruel that they not only maintained harsh revenue collection targets but also increased the land tax during the famine. Historian W. Hunter later described how peasants, driven by starvation, sold their cattle, tools, and even children, and eventually they themselves ate leaves and grass to survive. These horrors were not isolated. The Great Famine of 1876-78 ravaged the Deccan Plateau, claiming up to 8 million lives. Even amid mass starvation, the British exported millions of tons of grain to Britain. Apart from the factors mentioned above, the British economic policy of free market, which left prices of commodities free to fluctuate, contributed to the severity of the famines. Viceroy Lord Lytton notoriously refused government intervention to reduce food prices, and at the same time, in 1876, at the height of the Great Famine, Lytton organized an extravagant darbar in Delhi which involved a week-long feast for 68,000 officials, satraps, and maharajas. On the one side, the Indian population was fasting, and here they were feasting, Famine was not new to India, but under British rule, it became institutionalized through neglect and economic exploitation. Between the 18th and early 20th centuries, India witnessed over 20 major famines, with death tolls estimated between 50 to 100 million people, nearly the number of deaths caused by World War II. These cruel economic policies of Britishers were later coined as the drain of wealth by Dadabhai Nauroji, and later R.C. Dutt quantified it. Nauroji estimated that at least 200 to 300 million euros per year was being siphoned from India to Britain through exploitative trade practices, remittances of British officials, and outright plunder. India financed the British Empire's wars, infrastructure projects in other colonies, and even the Industrial Revolution in Britain, all at the cost of its own development. By the end of the colonial rule, India's share in the world economy had plummeted from 24% in 1700 to just 2% by 1947. When India unfurled its tricolour on August 15, 1947, it did so not as a thriving economic power, but as a partitioned, impoverished nation burdened with staggering illiteracy, deindustrialization, food insecurity, and broken institutions. But 77 years later, India stands as the fifth largest economy in the world, a global leader in space technology, digital innovation, and pharmaceuticals, and a crucial voice in shaping the world's political and economic discourse. Yet, the echoes of colonial extraction are still discernible in the socio-economic inequalities that persist.